Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Project Opono. In the last episode, we explored the freezing polar oceans of Opono. In this episode, we will cover the two weirdest ecosystems on the planet, the deep sea and freshwater. We will start our exploration in the deep sea. The deep sea is an extreme environment for life to be in. The crushing pressure, cold temperatures, and lack of light force the creatures of Opono to evolve wildly different ways of life. The deep sea is particularly difficult for plants. The lack of access to the sun means that photosynthesis in the depths will be nearly useless or all but impossible. However, some plants may be able to eke out a living in this extreme environment. Perhaps a particularly hardy relative of the Stellophyto evolves to grow around hydrothermal vents. Hydrothermal vents are openings in the planet crust formed from tectonic activity. These vents spew out various chemicals that organisms can take advantage of. Perhaps these Stellophyto evolves to ditch their photosynthetic pigment and transition to using chemosynthesis. Chemosynthesis is a process by which an organism uses chemicals to make energy they can use to survive. These vent-dwelling Stellophyto may take advantage of chemosynthesis to allow them to survive in the deep sea, being one of the only plant clades to do so. We will call these strange Stellophyto the Ochrocotrono. They may grow up to 5 inches tall and form vast groves around hydrothermal vents. The hydrothermal vents, being a hotspot of nutrients and heat, may prove critical to many organisms, particularly the Panoplicima. These sessile filter feeders, living in the seabed, may be an obvious resident of the deep sea. In convergence with the Ochrocotrono, these animals may evolve to utilize chemosynthesis. However, these animals cannot chemosynthesize on their own. Instead, they partner with chemosynthetic bacteria. These bacteria may grow in the tentacles of the Panoplicima, and in exchange for the Panoplicima giving them a safe place to live, the chemosynthetic bacteria give energy to their host. These chemosynthetic bacteria come in a range of colors, from purple to red to green. So these Panoplicima may vary similarly in color. However, the heat of the water around hydrothermal vents may boil the Panoplicima's tentacles, so they may evolve a shield made of their shell to protect them from the heat. We will call these strange Panoplicima the Eliospratza. They grow up to 10 inches tall and live for up to 5 years. Another way to get nourishment in the deep sea may come from a special event called a whale fall. This happens when a large creature dies and falls to the seabed. On Opono, this may most commonly happen when the Phalaenosoma or Limbrosoma die and sink to the ocean floor, either from old age, starvation, or other factors. The creatures most commonly found at these whale falls are the Macrosoma, Enedrosculi, and Diabrachid. These creatures may have representation in the deep sea due to this fact. Perhaps a deep-sea relative of the Macrosoma evolves to feed exclusively on these whale falls. Due to the darkness of the deep, these creatures may lose their eyes, relying on mechanoreception to find the carcass. This gives these creatures an unsettling, creepy appearance due to their lack of eyes and pale skin coloration. These creatures may congregate at these whale falls, either to feed or to mate. After mating, the female Macrosoma will find a nearby hydrothermal vent and lay her eggs, ensuring they are kept warm until they hatch. After hatching, the Macrosoma will immediately begin feeding on decaying matter, repeating the cycle of their parents. We will call them the Typhloskoliiki. They grow up to 2 feet long and live for up to 7 years. These creatures may be larger than their ancestors due to deep-sea gigantism. Deep-sea gigantism is a phenomenon on Earth where deep-sea animals are typically larger than their shallow water relatives. Another creature that could be found crawling along the seabed is the Diabrachid. However, these creatures may change their body plan in order to be better suited for life in the deep sea. Due to the lack of light here in the deep sea, sight will be nearly useless. As a result, in convergence with the Typhloskoliiki, these Diabrachids may lose their eyes. These creatures' tentacles may be covered in thousands of mechanoreceptive hairs, allowing them to sense food, mates, and danger. One thing to note about these creatures are the sails on their backs. This sail is lined with bioluminescent organs. The diabrachid can control whether to turn these lights on or off. The result in them using their bioluminescence as a deterrent, flashing them on and off to disorient and frighten predators such as deep-sea diabrachid and Souvlak azagoni. These animals may feed on the Okrokotrono and whale falls whenever they are available. Once every year, the deep-sea diabrachids migrate into the darkest depths of the ocean, away from any predators. It is here where something majestic happens. The diabrachids all start flashing their lights in a mesmerizing pattern. This display signals that mating season has started. And then, after the light show ends, the diabrachids all release their gametes into the water in one massive cloud. This ensures that the next generation of diabrachids are born. After about 1 to 2 days and the eggs form, the mother diabrachids will all die simultaneously, leaving the fathers to care and defend the eggs until they hatch. After the children hatch, the father will die due to not eating for the entirety that the eggs were being cared for. The young diabrachids then venture into the waters of their parents, repeating the cycle. We will call these fascinating diabrachids the Typhlitiganida. They grow up to 1 meter long and live for up to 15 years. Moving up into more open waters, we may find a surprising creature. While the Typhlitiganida crawls to new hydrothermal vents, there is another, more efficient way to travel to new areas. The diabrachids and their relatives are famous for being bottom dwellers. However, one clade among them stands out. The Ep5 are the only clade of diabrachids that possess a tail fin. However, this tail fin is only used to help bury themselves under the sand, but they may have an opportunity to move into more open waters thanks to a unique quirk of the deep sea. The crushing pressures of the deep sea may not allow creatures with bones to survive without some radical changes to their skeleton. This means that the Carchariapsari and Phalaenosoma may not have much of a presence in the deep sea. So perhaps a clade of Ep5 native to deeper waters evolves a new mode of locomotion. Currently, these creatures' fins are only used to help bury them under the sand. However, if the Ep5 fling their tail fin too hard, they may launch themselves up into the water. This may prove to be a better way of moving along the sea floor, so it may start to become their primary form of movement. Over time, these creatures may evolve a gas bladder which they can use to keep themselves floating in the water after they leap. This, coupled with moving their tail fin, may allow these creatures to evolve to swim. However, due to the way these creatures' bodies are, their tail fin may only be able to move up and down. This may result in them only being able to swim by moving their tail fin in up and down motion. To give them stability while swimming, their fin may split into 2 extra side fins used to control the creature's position in the water, along with providing more locomotive power. They may also start evolving a second pair of eyes for better depth perception. However, due to the lack of light in the deep, their eyes may not have any lenses. We will call these strange swimmers the Panicado. They grow up to 1.5 meters long and live for up to 17 years. Traveling from one vent to another is a long and treacherous journey. While the Panicado and Typhlitiganida may be able to migrate from vent to vent, other creatures may start to hitch a ride on them. Perhaps a small clade of the diabrachids evolves to cling on to the backs of these larger creatures. Their tentacles may split at the end, evolving into pincers. These creatures use these pincers to cling to the skin of their host so they aren't dislodged while they move. When the host reaches a new hydrothermal vent or a whale fall, the diabrachid will let go of the host and begin to feed and breed with other members of its species. After mating, the female diabrachid will lay upwards of 5,000 eggs near a hydrothermal vent. This reproduction strategy is called R-selection, where an organism reproduces in vast quantities in the hopes of few will survive to adulthood. After hatching, the babies will immediately begin looking for a house to cling on to, allowing them to store what little energy they have left after hatching. We will call these small passengers the taxitses. They grow up to 2 inches long and live for up to 3 years. The Parvapsari, being as adaptable as they are, may find a home in this extreme ecosystem. Unlike the Osteopinae, these creatures never evolved bones, so they may have an edge in colonizing the deep sea. However, this means they will face new threats they have never seen before, such as the panicado. To counter the panicado, these creatures may partner with bioluminescent bacteria. One clade of Parvipsari may evolve to house these bacteria in a special pouch. This pouch may provide protection to the bacteria, along with a safe place to reproduce. In exchange for giving the Parvipsari use of their light, the Parvipsari may secrete a constant flow of nutrients into this pouch to keep their bacteria alive. However, these bacteria play a much more crucial role than just being a light source for the Parvipsari. They also can be used against predators. If threatened by a predator, the Parvipsari may start rapidly secreting hormones into its pouch. These hormones send the bacteria into a frenzy, making them rapidly turn their bioluminescence on and off like a light switch. This intense display may scare predators into thinking they are in danger, causing them to flee and leave the animal alone. Once a threat is no longer detected, the Parvipsari stops secreting the hormones, allowing the bacteria to rest and go dark for a while. This relationship between guest and host is called mutualistic symbiosis, where both parties gain something from each other in exchange for the other giving them something in return. The bacteria of the Parvipsari may range in color from blue to green to yellow and any color in between. However, once every year, something shifts within the Parvipsari. During mating season, the Parvipsari rise from the depths. They congregate under the moonlight and begin to breed. After mating, the female will lay her eggs along the coast before the group dives back down to the depths. After around 1 week, the next generation of Parvipsari hatch and start making their way down to the deep. Along the way, many are eaten, with the schools dropping in number, from 10,000 to 5,000 before they finally reach the deep. Once they reach the deep sea, the baby Parvipsari start producing that attracts the bioluminescent bacteria, making them fill their pouches. Once the pouch is full, it fully seals, giving the Parvipsari its own unique cultivar of bacteria. This gives every creature a slightly unique color. We will call these strange creatures the Thickalizer. They grow up to 1 foot long and live for up to 10 years. The deep sea is a tough environment with limited food. Coupled with the extreme cold and lack of light, predators here may need to evolve extraordinary adaptations to find and kill prey. Meet the Delirpsaria, descendants of the Souvlacozygoni. These scary predators have taken up a niche similar to the anglerfish of Earth. One of their dorsal fins has evolved a fleshy lure at its tip, designed to lure in curious prey such as the panicato and Thickalizer. They produce their bioluminescence on their own, not aided by any bioluminescent bacteria. Once prey is right in front of the glowing lure, their gate is sealed. With a lightning-fast motion, the Delirpsaria stabs its prey, killing it instantly. Their to lower jaw tentacles have become heavily muscled, allowing them to tackle the largest of prey, like the panicado. Their tail fin has evolved a tail spike to allow them to achieve bursts of speed to catch speedy prey such as the Thickalizer. These creatures also use their lures to attract mates. By flashing their lights, they can seduce a partner. If the potential mate responds in tandem, mating is initiated. Once laid near a hydrothermal vent, the eggs of the Delirpsaria are abandoned by the parents. After about a week and a half, the eggs hatch, giving rise to the next generation of Delirpsaria. They grow up to 2.5 meters long and live for up to 21 years. Their larger size is correlated with the abundance of prey they lure in, along with deep-sea gigantism. Returning to the dark and eerie sea bed, we find the Calbopla. These creatures are relatives of the Mecheiriodonta who have evolved to feed on the Elaiospratza and other deep-sea Panoplicima. To do so, however, they need a way to crack open their shells. To do this, their once sharp, knife-like teeth have evolved into large clubs which they can use to shatter the shells of their prey. Once the shell is broken, the Calbopla feeds on its kill. These creatures use a unique quirk of the deep sea to hide from predators and prey alike. Red light is an extremely short wavelength. This means that it is absorbed by the water at much shallower levels than blue or purple light. The Calbopla took advantage of this fact, becoming a bright red color. Due to the lack of red light in the deep sea, predators appear black to organisms with eyes, such as the thicalizer. Their strange hunchback condition is due to the fact that their relatives used their tentacles like about to kill their prey. The Calbopla instead holds its tentacle out wide before curling its back up into a curve before rapidly relaxing those muscles, slamming into its prey. However, their clubs mean they can also feed on the bones of whale falls, giving them an exclusive food source that nothing else can use. This may allow the Calbopla to become extremely successful near the seafloor, allowing them to become the apex predators of the deep-sea ocean floor. They grow up to 2.1 meters long and live for up to 27 years. Another deep-sea floor predator may come from descendants of the Corallisoma. These creatures, which we will call the Yuganasongo, have evolved a hunting strategy similar to the Delirpsaria. They possess bioluminescent strips on their tentacles. They don't make their own light, however, as they employ the help of bioluminescent bacteria. Similarly to the thicalizer, the Yuganasongo provide protection and food for their bacteria, and in return the bacteria give the predator use of their lights. These creatures' shells have evolved to be made of flexible chitin to allow them to move easier to catch their prey. To capture prey, the Yuganasongo contracts its body and tentacles, making itself shorter. Once prey such as the thicalizer comes to investigate the glowing red lights, the Yuganasongo rapidly makes itself taller again. Immediately after, its tentacles stab the prey, grabbing it and dragging it into its large stomach. This hunting style is quite effective for the Yuganasongo. The filter-feeding hairs of their ancestors have concentrated and hardened at the tips of their tentacles, becoming to sharp dagger-like teeth which they use to kill prey. The Yuganasongo grows up to 1 meter tall and lives for up to 27.5 years. With the evolution of all these new predators, the Panicado may have to adapt. Perhaps one branch of Panicado evolves to hide itself from the view of predators. But how would they do this? On Earth, cephalopod skin contains special cells called chromatophores. These chromatophores can help them change skin color. This is most common in shallower waters, but some species of deep-sea squid retain this ability. So perhaps these Panicado evolve millions of these chromatophores all along their skin. When not in danger, these chromatophores will make the skin appear gray. However, if a predator is spotted, the chromatophores rapidly shift from gray to red. As explained earlier, red light isn't very common in the deep sea. So these Panicado will be completely hidden from predators once their chromatophores shift to red, allowing them to quickly escape. These creatures may feed on the Ocrocotrono, Typhloskiliki, and Taxitses. We will call these color-changing Panicado the Iricomica. They grow up to 2 meters long and live for up to 23 years. While the deep sea may prevent creatures with bones from inhabiting it, it isn't implausible that a clade of Phalaenosoma evolved to live in the depths. However, they may make some radical changes to their body plan in order to be better suited for life in the deep. Their bones may become extremely light and flexible, allowing the Phalaenosoma to colonize the deep sea. However, due to the lack of the phytoplankton and micropene blooms in the deep sea, the Phalaenosoma may have to switch to another food source. They may evolve to feed around hydrothermal vents similarly to the Eliaspratza. However, their current feeding method won't be efficient enough. So perhaps the deep-sea Phalaenosoma evolved to move their filtering hairs off of their tentacles and into their mouth and throat. As this happens, their mouth may elongate into a trunk, giving them easier access to food. This gives them a wildly different appearance than their ancestral body plan. Due to hydrothermal vents being heavily spaced out, the large sizes of their ancestors may become detrimental to their survival. So these creatures may evolve to be smaller, to require less food. However, this may not provide them any protection from predators, so they may form pods of up to 15 individuals for safety in numbers. We will call these small Phalaenosoma the Concuchi. They grow up to 2.5 meters long and live for up to 16 years. One of the largest deep-sea creatures on Earth are siphonophores. These creatures are massive colonial organisms made up of thousands of individuals who appear as one organism. Each individual animal is known as a zooid. These zooids allow the siphonophores to grow massive without worrying about any consequences except food and reproduction. Perhaps a strange clade of Dakiosoma evolves into the niche of a siphonophore. However, one problem with this is that they are sessile. However, as explained in Episode 2, the larvae of the Dakiosoma are motile, swimming in the open ocean until they fall to the sea floor and mature. So perhaps another instance of neoteny occurs within the Dakiosoma lineage. However, this time, the larvae may begin to congregate and form huge colonies in the deep sea. This may result in these creatures becoming the largest clade of deep-sea animal on the planet, with their maximum size being nearly endless. These colonies may be made up of thousands of individual zooids, each with their own role in the colony. There may be two dominant zooids in the social ladder, however. The zooids that take responsibility for feeding and reproduction are the most important zooids for the colony to protect, as they bear the role of helping the colony survive. The rest of the zooids make up the main body, housing the digestive system, circulatory system, and other organs. However, one fact about the Dakiosoma is that their tentacles have eyes at the tips. This may mean that any segment with tentacles may also have eyes. Some of the tentacles may be broader, becoming fins, allowing the colony to swim slowly across the dark depths. However, as explained earlier, these tentacles, or fins, may have eyes on them, adding to the already strange appearance of these creatures. We will call these massive colonial organisms the Paraxipoi. They grow to a maximum of a few dozen meters long and live for up to 100 plus years. Moving up into shallower waters, we will now traverse the rivers and lakes of Opono. The rivers and lakes of Opono will be another habitat the organisms will have to adapt to. The fast currents of rivers, the murky waters of lakes, and the varying light levels form several distinct layers of life or microhabitats. In particular, plants in these bodies of fresh water will face a unique challenge in every body of fresh water they colonize. They will need to develop extraordinary adaptations to survive in these environments, such as tighter stems and shorter bodies. Perhaps a clade of Phyceophyto evolves to live in the rivers and lakes of Opono. Their main bodies are hidden underground, with only their leaves sticking out of the mud. Their soft leaves will allow them to bend with the current of rivers, allowing them to not be ripped out of the ground. These plants reproduce asexually, colonizing barren rivers and lakes very quickly, carpeting the river bed with mats of vegetation. We will call them the Kawakusa. They grow up to 1 foot tall. While the Kawakusa fill the role of ground vegetation, other plants may fill the role of large riverbank plant. This may come from a clade of Silostel. These plants, which we will call the Ridicon, may grow along the riverbanks similarly to earth reeds. Their stem may harden, becoming almost woody. This is to help resist the strong river currents. Their leaves may also become smaller due to them being almost always in the air. Their leaves may evolve a thick waxy cuticle along with stomata to be able to stand the hot sun. With these adaptations, the Ridicon is well equipped to survive in muddy swamps and rivers, being the first clade of semi-aquatic plants on the planet. They grow up to 5 feet tall. The Kawakusa and Ridicon will form the base of the freshwater food web, paving the way for the animals to colonize fresh water. Meet the Porvoplavni, descendants of the Araphalu. These strange creatures have adapted to live in the rivers and lakes of Opono in several unique ways. They have increased in body length to easily snake through dense vegetation. They have evolved fin-driven swimming. Their first 2 pairs of fins have evolved into the primary locomotive fins, while the remaining fins have become ripped and tattered. These fins inhibit their locomotion, but greatly increase their hiding effectiveness, allowing them to blend in with their surroundings. Interestingly, their ancestral social hierarchy has evolved into something much greater. Their groups have evolved into harems. A harem is an animal group consisting of 1 or 2 males, a number of females, and their offspring. The dominant male Porvoplavni drives off other competing males and maintains the unity of the group. If present, the second male Porvoplavny is subservient to the dominant male. However, if the second male Porvoplavny ever tries to mate with a female without the dominant male knowing, they too will engage in battle until one backs down or is killed. However, if one of the female Porvoplavnys are pregnant, the males will be fiercely protective of her and the eggs, attacking anything that gets within range, even plants that bend to close. Once the baby Porvoplavny are fully matured, they are exiled from the group to prevent inbreeding. It is at this point the males will start to form their own harems, and the females will look for harems to join. The Porvoplavny grow up to 1.5 feet long and live for up to 11 years. Another herbivore may come from a generalist clade of Ramphistodontia. These creatures' transition to a more herbivorous lifestyle is a drastic one, resulting in their weirder appearance and smaller size. However, the drastic change in ecosystem may account for this switch in diet, as there are no corallisoma to eat in the rivers. So, the freshwater Ramphistodontia may substitute their diet with plants, becoming full herbivores. With their powerful jaws and beaks, they may be able to feed on the stems of the Ridicon, being one of the only clades to feed on their trunks and branches. However, they won't pass up the occasional dead body or kawakusa. However, the murky waters may make seeing difficult for these creatures. Although their echolocation may help them find food, it may not be enough. So perhaps the eyes of these creatures evolve a tapetum lucidum. A tapetum lucidum is a layer of tissue in the eyes of some animals that help them see in the dark, and in this will help the Ramphistodontia see in the dimly lit murky water. This adaptation may also give them a creepy appearance, as the eyes will look like they glow in the dark. We will call these eerie freshwater creatures the Calamitragon. They grow up to 2 feet long and live for up to 17 years. Due to the abundant groves of plant life in the rivers and lakes, any different clades of herbivores may be able to feed on them exclusively. One such clade is the Agelidinopsari. Due to the large amounts of food, these creatures may grow larger, with the freshwater Agelidinopsari being one of the largest clades in the whole ecosystem, even outgrowing their underwater forest forms in size and weight. With this increased weight, their flippers may not be able to support their movements. So, the freshwater Agelidinopsari may evolve their flippers into true legs. To support these legs, they may evolve a skeleton similar to those of the Osteopinae of the open ocean. With this skeleton, the freshwater Agelidinopsari will be able to walk along the riverbed in search of food and mates. Their legs will be splayed out to the side of the body, similar to earth lizards. Despite the inefficient posture, the lower gravity of Opono means that this style of walking is more effective than on Earth. However, it still may limit their maximum size and weight, although it still may allow them to grow quite large. However, not every pair of flippers may evolve into legs. Only the first 2 pairs of flippers have evolved into legs. The last pair of flippers have evolved into gonopods, structures used to latch onto mates during breeding. This gives the Agelidinopsari a quadrupedal stance, becoming the first clade of quadrupedal hexapinae on the planet. To be visible to one another, the freshwater Agelidinopsari evolve rings of colored skin around their eyes. The males only have one general eye ring color, neon green. The females, however, have more colorful colored eye rings, being anything from blue to green to purple. This is an example of the simplest form of sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism means that there is an observable difference in physical characteristics between males and females of the same species. They may also advance their ancestral breeding behaviors accordingly. In the ancestral Agelidinopsari, the males and females exhibited different social behaviors. The males were solitary, while the females congregated in maternal herds of 7 individuals, not including their calves. This may eventually develop into a more advanced breeding system. During mating season, the males will group together into large congregations or leks and compete with one another in view of passing groups of females. If a female is impressed by a specific male, she will send out a call while making eye contact with a specific male she chooses. The male then responds in tandem and then initiates a mating ritual. After mating, the female will hold an egg sac in her gonapods, keeping her young safe until they hatch. After the egg sac hatches, the father Agelidinopsari will start bringing food to the baby Agelidinopsari until they are developed enough to survive on their own, at which point he will abandon the mother and her calves. This mating system is known as serial monogamy, where a pair of animals stay together for their entire life to raise young up until the young mature enough, in which one of the parents will then leave. We will call these giants the Phytotacarida. They grow up to 4 meters long and live for up to 25 years. With the abundance of herbivores, predators are bound to follow. Perhaps a clade related to the diabrachids evolves into an ambush predator. They may hide their bodies under the mud with only their tongue and eye stalks sticking out of the ground. One interesting feature of these predators are the 3 fleshy spikes on their backs. These spikes mimic the shape and color of a kawakusa, luring in hungry herbivores such as the porvoplavny. Once the prey gets close enough, they strike, impaling their prey on their tongue. They then drag their kill under the mud and begin to feed on it before getting back into position. We will call these plant mimics the Filipiso. They grow up to 2.1 feet long and live for up to 10 years. The panicado of the deep sea may find a home in the rivers and lakes of Opono. But due to the drastic shift in environment, their morphology may change drastically. Their eyes may evolve lenses to see in the brighter waters. Along with this, they may lose their tail fin, instead using their side fins to swim through the dense vegetation. As a result, they may lose their tail fin and evolve a body plan similar to the manta ray of Earth. To support their muscular fins, they may evolve a single cartilage skeleton. This skeleton may primarily be in the fins, giving them support. This has resulted in them having 2 spines, one on each side, with offshoots extending into the side fins. This makes these panicado the first diabrachids to have an internal support structure. This may allow these panicado to diversify massively in the coming few million years. We will call them the actinocosin. They grow up to 2.6 feet long and live for up to 17 years. With the abundance of detritus and dead material piling up on the river bed, animals will start taking advantage of this untapped food source. One such animal is the ruca. These creatures are related to the Catharapsari of the underwater jungle. However, they don't possess the rattle of their ancestors. Instead, their upper tentacle has developed into an arm-like appendage. The end of this tentacle is split into 3 fingers, allowing the ruca to pick up food items and pass it into their mouth with the help of the 2 lower tentacles. However, this hand can do more than pick up food. They can use their hands to pick up and throw things such as rocks. But why would they do this? You see, these creatures travel in groups of up to 50 individuals. However, these groups aren't just for protection, they are for helping one another. These creatures are altruistic, meaning that they depend on each other for their mutual success. While the school forages for food, one stays behind to look out for danger. The lookout keeps a constant eye out for danger. If a predator is spotted, the lookout will pick up a rock. It will then throw the rock at the rest of the group and let out a loud scream, warning the school of the incoming danger. However, what use is this strategy if an individual skips its duties for a free meal? You see, being alone is dangerous for any lonely ruca. Predators lurk everywhere you look, meaning there is a constant source of danger and death. So it is in the ruca's best interest to do its duties to stay in the protection of the school. However, if an individual constantly skips its duties, the leader will pelt it with rocks, signaling that it has been exiled. Leaving the group is almost guaranteed death, so the individual will never be able to cheat the system again. These creatures grow up to 0.5 meter long and live for up to 19 years. Another scavenger may come from yet another clade of freshwater panicado. Similarly to the actinocosin, these creatures may differ significantly to their ancestors, becoming nearly unrecognizable. Their body may elongate, becoming ovular in shape. At the same time, their tentacles may go lower down the face to make grabbing food easier. These creatures' eyes may become smaller, being nearly useless. Instead, they may use a pair of sensory whiskers on their heads to find food. These whiskers will be highly sensitive, being more sensitive than a human finger. This allows the panicado to identify anything they find with ease, from food to mates to predators. These whiskers may also aid the creature in taste, allowing them to taste their food before ingesting it. These traits give the panicado an appearance similar to earth catfish. We will call these odd creatures the Geniano. They grow up to half a meter long and live up to 11 years. Another scavenger may come from relatives of the Typhlitiganida. These creatures, which we will call the Denphilosoma, mimic the leaf of a dead thallus philo to not be noticed amongst the leaf litter of the seabed. To appear as a more convincing leaf, their already flat bodies may flatten out more than they already are. The mechanoreceptive hairs on ends of their tentacles may elongate, evolving into hairy brushes the Denphilosoma can use to sift through the leaf litter for anything edible. Due to their lack of eyes, their mechanoreceptors will act as their sense of taste, their sense of sight, and sense of smell. If a threat is sensed, the Denphilosoma will rapidly shake its body, burying itself under the leaf litter. However, this may not be enough to deter the most persistent predators. So perhaps the Denphilosoma may evolve a form of toxin, more specifically poison. This poison may be contained in special glands evolved from old digestive organs no longer used by the Denphilosoma. This poison is then distributed into the flesh of their body, making every part unsafe to eat. This added form of defense will mean that the Denphilosoma will be left well alone, allowing them to forage among the leaf litter without fear of attack. They grow up to 2 meters long and live for up to 10 years. On the surface of the water, we may find species of the Tmimitos philo. These plants will be similar to earth lilipads. However, one issue they face is dispersal. The spores of the Tmimitos philo can't travel far outside of water, so wind dispersal won't be an effective strategy. So perhaps these plants evolve small, bulbous fruits at the ends of their roots. These fruits will be filled with a nutritious, sweet flesh, which is an irresistible bribe for herbivores. These fruits may contain the plant's seeds, which may be reinforced with an outer layer to survive the digestion process. Once eaten and passed out in the animal's excrement, the seeds will mature, floating to the surface of the water and maturing into an adult. We will call these fruit-bearing Tmimitos philo the Condylophilo. They grow up to 1 foot wide. As the Condylophilo begins to carpet the surface of the water, the roots may start to tangle together into a thick mat. These root tangles will create the perfect microhabitat for a few clades of animals that can adapt to survive there. Perhaps the thickalizer of the deep sea may come to find a niche in this microhabitat. These animals may not be much different than their ancestors, with several major exceptions. Their top 2 tentacles may evolve dagger-like teeth at the ends, which they can use to spear the fruits of the Condylophilo and bring them closer to the mouth. The second major difference is their lack of bacteria pouch. This is because the higher light levels of fresh water will allow these organisms to survive without their biological partners. Instead, that pouch has been repurposed. This pouch serves an important role in reproduction and the survival of the juveniles. This pouch, similarly to those of earth marsupials, provides a place for the young thickalizer to develop until they are mature enough to leave it for good. However, only the male bears this pouch, similarly to earth seahorses. Once the male and female thickalizer have mated, the mother will deposit her eggs within the male's pouch. She will then depart to find another mate, leaving the male to care for the eggs alone. This is called male-only parental care, where only the male of a species takes on the role of caring for the young. As the eggs develop in the male's pouch, it will begin to swell, getting the male and almost pregnant appearance. During this time, the father thickalizer will barely eat, putting all of his time and effort into the eggs. After around a month and a half, the eggs finally hatch. It is at this point that the male Winzig will die, having starved himself for his offspring. The juveniles, needing an early energy boost, will then devour the corpse of their father, giving them an advantage in the dangerous rivers they call home. However, after this point, they will only eat the leaves and fruits of the Condylophilo. We will call them the winzig. They grow up to 1.5 feet long and live for up to 9 years. Another creature that could be found in the root tangles are the Micropinae. These small animals may be perfectly pre-adapted to life in this microhabitat and so may quickly colonize it. Pre-adapted animals are animals that evolved a body plan that may turn out later to be suited for a later environment. The small size of the Micropinae may allow them to easily dart between the gaps between the Condylophilo roots, however they still may be too densely packed to swim through. So perhaps the freshwater Micropinae become the second clade of animals to evolve legs. However, due to their lack of skeleton, the Micropinae's legs may be made of pure muscle. This is very inefficient and energetically demanding. However, the small size of the Micropinae coupled with the lower gravity lessens these constraints, allowing the Micropinae to get away with having no skeleton. These creatures' legs may allow them to walk along the roots of the Condylophilo. However, they may need another way to get from root to root. So perhaps their back pair of legs evolved to be larger and more powerful than the rest. This may allow the Micropinae to hop from root to root in search of food. However, they may occasionally hop out of the water while trying to get to another root. This may cause them to become semi-aquatic to deal with being out of the water for short amounts of time. These creatures may take part in playful competitions. They may do this during their childhood by trying to see who can stay on their hind legs the longest. These competitions aren't meant to hurt the other's chances at finding a mate later in life. They are just a form of play for these creatures. These animals will feed exclusively on the fruits of the Condylophilo. We will call these small jumpers the Microltus. They grow up to 5 inches long and live for up to 5 years. The root tangle microhabitat is bound to have a top predator similarly to every other environment on the planet. This apex predator may come about from a clade of neotenous Panoplicima. The Panoplicima larvae, similar to those of the Daciosoma, are motile, swimming through the water until they find a placenta stick and make a shell. However, if neoteny occurs in a clade of Panoplicima, they may be able to take up a life of swimming in and around the root tangles, searching for winzig and Microltus to feed on. The tentacles of these creatures may broaden into fins similar to the event that occurs in some Paraxopoizoids in the deep sea. As their tentacles broaden into fins, they may lose their role in feeding, however, they may evolve to slap their prey, stunning them. However, this slap will only stun prey for a few seconds. So perhaps they evolve a new way of making sure their prey can't escape. They may evolve 2 claws at the ends of their fins. These Panoplicima may also evolve an extra method of immobilizing their prey. They may evolve a form of venom. Venom is a biological toxin actively delivered by an animal through a sting or bite to subdue prey or deter predators, usually injected into their bloodstreams. These Panoplicima's venom glands may evolve near the base of the claws where, after they slap their prey, the muscles around the glands will contract, squeezing the venom out and into grooves in the claws. This injects the prey with the venom, which paralyzes the target and allows the Panoplicima to get the kill. However, as explained earlier, the fins have lost their role in feeding and restraining prey. So purpose the mouth of these creatures evolves into a trunk similar to those of earth elephants. This trunk will allow these Panoplicima to grab their paralyzed prey before swimming to the riverbed to feed on their kill. However, their shells pose a problem. Their shell is made of hardened minerals such as calcium. This makes it very heavy, rigid, and inflexible. However, instead of evolving a shell made of lighter and more flexible materials, they may instead evolve thousands of tiny air pockets within the shell itself to reduce its weight. All of these adaptations give these Panoplicima a body plan similar to the extinct armored cephalopods of Earth, more specifically the Ordovician Camerochreas. However, there is one last issue to solve before they can fully take over the predatory niches of the root tangles. That issue is their eyes. The eyes of the Panoplicima were originally on the ends of their tentacles. but with their tentacles becoming their primary way of swimming and injecting prey with venom, their eyes may get damaged. To solve this issue, their eyes may migrate onto the main body. They may be positioned one on top of the other with the larger eye on the bottom to spot its prey easier. This gives them an even stranger appearance, however it will still allow them to fill the role of apex predator in the root tangle microhabitat. We will call these strange squid-like Panoplicima the Lolligatesta. They grow up to 5 feet long and live for up to 14 years. Back below the root tangles, the remaining predatory niches of freshwater remain unfilled. One such role is that of an apex predator. Perhaps a clade related to the Aono evolves to become the apex freshwater predator. Being scavengers, the Aono are already somewhat adapted to predatory niches due to feeding on dead animals. So a transition to feeding on live prey may be quite easy for them. However, they may still make several adaptations to suit this new predatory lifestyle, one of which being better eyes. The eyes of the Aono are small, having lost the role of finding food to the sensory whiskers. However, being a predator puts a premium on good eyesight, as seeing prey is just as useful as finding prey. So perhaps the eyes of the Aono enlarge, gaining the role of finding prey at a distance. However, as explained earlier, the murky waters of the rivers may make seeing prey difficult, even with larger eyes. So perhaps these Aono evolve a new way to help them see their prey in the murky water. They may evolve a tapetum lucidum. A tapetum lucidum is a reflective layer of tissue behind the retina in the eyes that enhances vision in low light conditions. This can be seen in some catfish on Earth. The Aono, being similar to catfish, may convergently evolve a tapetum lucidum, allowing them to see prey in the murkiest of waters. Along with this, their sensory whiskers may get more sensitive, giving them even better sensory information about the things around them. The whiskers may also aid the animal in tasting and smelling food, allowing the Aono to take in information about the things it is eating. Another thing they may evolve is electroreception. Electroreception is an organism's ability to detect electric fields, enabling navigation, hunting, and communication in both aquatic and terrestrial environments. There are 2 forms of electroreception. There is passive electroreception, where organisms detect external fields from other living things or objects. And there is active electroreception, where an organism can generate their own fields and sense distortions caused by their surroundings. Both forms of electroreception can be observed on Earth. Sharks and rays use passive electroreception to find prey, while electric fish use active electroreception to locate objects. Perhaps the predatory Aono opt for using active electroreception, using the electric fields around them to track their prey from a distance and ambush them. However, evolving active electroreception may require them to evolve an electric organ. An electric organ is a specialized organ that generates electric fields for communication, navigation, defense, and hunting. As they don't use electroreception currently, they may take millions of years to evolve it on their own. So this may result in the looking significantly different than their ancestral form. Their electric organ may be located on their heads, giving them the best possible way of using their electroreception to find their prey. However, they may also use it to stun their prey using their whiskers. They may store their electricity in their whiskers until they find a prey item to feed on. Once they find prey, they will whip said prey with their whiskers, electrocuting them. This stuns the prey, allowing the Aono to get an easy kill. However, to catch up to speedy prey, they may need other specialization for speed. These adaptations include the evolution of a dorsal fin and more powerful fins. These adaptations will allow the Aono to dart through the river with surprising speed, giving them the ability to catch even the speediest of prey items. This may give them the rank of apex predator in the rivers and lakes of Opono. Without any competition, the Aono are free to grow larger, becoming the largest predator in the rivers they call home. We will call these electric predators the Lystricmatia. They grow up to 6 meters long and live for up to 27 years. Meet the Austriacabuc, relatives of the Panoplicima. These spiky creatures have evolved into a niche similar to Earth sea urchins. Their shell has evolved many spikes around its surface to deter animals from trying to eat them. These spikes are barbed, similar to the quills of porcupines. This causes the spikes to stick into the flesh of predators' mouths, causing extreme pain and swelling. For extra damage, to spiken on the front and back have enlarged dramatically and have a forked end to cause as much pain as possible. This sends a signal to predators that they are not an easy meal, allowing the Austriacabuc to feed without fear of attack. However, the Austriacabuc aren't exclusively freshwater inhabitants. These animals are native to the ocean, more specifically the seabed. Here they feed on marine snow and small plants. However, during mating season, the Austriacabuc journey to the rivers and lakes. It is here where they congregate in large groups upwards of 150 individuals. They then spew their gametes into the water, giving them the best chance to unite and form offspring. The larvae then make their way back to the open ocean over the next few days before falling to the seafloor and making their shells. However, how do these creatures move? On Earth, sea anemones are able to walk along the seabed with their suction cup. This helps them evade predators such as starfish. The Austriacabuc have evolved the same mechanism, flexing and pushing their muscular foot along the seafloor or riverbed in order to move to mating grounds, find food, or evade predation. The Austriacabuc grow up to 5 inches tall, while their spikes can grow up to 15 inches long. Species can be found all across the planet, although they are most common in rivers, the ocean floor, and in reefs. Not every predator is as afraid of the Austriacabuc's thorny shell, however. These animals are the reef-dwelling Schizimobrachid. These predators can crush the shells of the Austriacabuc using their claws, so perhaps they evolved to take advantage of this fact, leading to the evolution of the synthlivin. The claws of the synthlivin have evolved to be similar to the crusher claws of earth clobsters. They are heavily muscled and powerful, crushing even the strong's Austriacabuc shells and spikes. They start off by crushing the spikes off of the Austriacabus shells, making them easier to grab onto. They then crush the remaining shell, exposing the soft flesh inside. They then scrape the Austriacabuc out of the shell using 2 dagger-like bottom jaw teeth before discarding the shells to find another Austriacabuc to eat. However, the synthlivin isn't a picky eater. Whenever Austriacabuc aren't around to eat, they will feed on Liligatesta, Microltus, and even Ridicon if desperate. This makes the synthlivin very adaptable, allowing them to feed anything they can get their claws on. This will give them an advantage in more competitive environments, allowing them to avoid competition with other predators such as the Lystricmatia. However, their life cycle is a peculiar one. During breeding season, the synthlivin will migrate out of the rivers and lakes and into the open ocean seabed. There they will then mate. The females will then travel back to the rivers and lakes and carry the eggs inside them for around 1 Earth month until they hatch within her oviducts. This birthing style is called ovoviviparity. In the last episode, we discussed how ovoviviparity evolved in the Arctic conostoma and limbrosoma as a way to keep the eggs safe from the cold. However, ovoviviparity in these synthlivin will be quite different. After the eggs hatch, the babies will begin to cannibalize each other, similarly to earth sand tiger sharks. This cannibalism will ensure only the strongest baby from both oviducts survive, giving them the hunting experience and survival instincts they need to survive their environment. After being born, the babies will depart from her mother and begin hunting Austriacabus and other small prey. The synthlivin grows up to 0.5 meter long and lives for up to 13 years.
Up until now, all life on Opono has been confined to the water. From the ocean surface to the deep sea, life is found in all corners of the ocean, but all of that is about to change. In the next episode, we will explore how some of the organisms evolved to live on dry land. Special thanks to the fan artists on Discord who submitted fan art for this episode. You all helped make this video a lot better than it would have been without your help. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.